All right. Thanks for coming, everyone. This is a topic that was born out of a coffee that Zea and I had recently after they reached out and said, hey, I'd like to talk on this topic. And so we had a coffee and had a conversation that opens my eyes to a few things, made me think about certain things in a different way in terms of how team culture impacts the way in which teams perform and the outcomes that they can create and how efficient they can work and how well they communicate. And Zea's thinking about this from a very different perspective to how I might thinking about it and about how other people might think about it as well. So I thought, great topic to share. And because we have such a small group today, I thought we would turn the tables a little bit at the end of the discussion. And Zea's really keen to have this as interactive as possible for you to ask questions, and Zea will attempt to answer them and let you know if she doesn't know the answer. But just that sort of discussion, I think, fits really well with the topic, and hopefully you all feel comfortable listening and participating and sharing and just being in the room while we discuss these things. So with that, Zea, I'll let you come up and start doing your thing while I crouch behind this computer in order to turn the stream back. So if you stand here, then we can kick off. That's good.
Kia ora. Yeah, so thank you for all of that welcome. And yeah, absolutely. Let's make this a little bit more discussion focused than had been additionally planned. As I said to you guys before we started, surprise participation is the worst. So thank you for saying that you're up for that. I think it really will add to this, add to the korero. So, setting the scene. Is that doing what it? Awesome. As product people, I know that we love data. Statistically, this graphic has accompanied about 75% of the talks that I've done in the past couple of years. So we're going to start with that, and I can post the link to it later if you can't see it properly. So I think it sets the tone perfectly, and it also helps to explain why I'll mostly be reading from notes. But as I just said, given the small size, and I've rewritten this 3 times in the last 2 days, I really do think let's pivot across to discussion. Cool. So a little bit more intro. One of my favorite product Aotearoa moments was at conference a couple of years ago when Nicole Williams from Trade Me made a call for more real human stories, and I'm pretty sure that it was during the panel rather than her keynote talk. Discussions about the failures and the gritty decision making. The process of learning rather than just the successes and the winning metrics and all of that shiny stuff, because we can often learn more from those discussions than we can from here's how this thing that I did went really perfectly and nothing went wrong. It was great. We can often learn more from someone in the trenches, from how they kept going when it all went wrong, or just any story from the perspective that's different to our own. So I've taken that permission and I've run with it. Here's a story about my journey through the last few years, about neurodiversity and inclusion. It's ironic, I can never say neurodiversity properly. I always spell it wrong too. Neurodiversity and inclusion, leadership and influence, and applying product practice to culture. Hopefully it gives you some things to think about to take back and test with your teams. As you can see, huge fan of memes. And I hope you're good with swears. So kia ora. Ko wai katoa te awe e mahia nei aku mā harahara, ko tarurua ngā pai maunga te ru nei taku ngāko. E mihi ana ki ngā tuhu o nehe o Wairarapa e noho nei o, ko tangata whai taki wakatanga o arorere tēnei o. Tēnei tātou katoa. Actually, my voice already. So I'm Zea. I'm here to speak to you about culture as a product. And thanks, just to pivot away from my notes already, thanks Tony for that welcome also and bringing up safe space, because that really gets to the heart of what this is about. as well. So yeah, as you can tell, I'm still kind of settling into standing here. So in the spirit of inclusive practice, let's just take a breath. I'm going to take a breath and we'll let go of any expectations about that you might have of me as a speaker, as a performer, if yourselves performing as an audience. On that note, if you're a fidget like me, there's a bucket of shapes there. I've got Lego in my bag. You're welcome to sit, stand, whatever you need to do, eat the chips. Please feel free to go for it. As I referred to in my mihi, I'm far more comfortable with rivers and mountains than microphones, far happier at home in the lighted upper than at an event. Having said that, I've learned that connection on my terms, like getting in a room and geeking out about really cool topics, is actually really fulfilling. Geeking out with people about stuff is my favorite thing in the world. I don't even care what we're geeking out about. If people are really into something, that is my favorite thing. So I am pleased to be here. I have autism and ADHD, and honestly, I'm still kind of learning how to talk about that, and how not to be apologetic about it as well. Which can make occasions like today, and saying that I have a master's degree which focused on neuroinclusion a wild ride, but I think we'll be okay. Last point before we move on from the intro. They tell me memes aren't really all that appropriate for all forms of corporate communication. I'm suspicious about that. I deny that, and this is a meetup, so this informs the shape of things to come. Here are your takeaways. I hope this is what you get out of today. I'll tell my story. I'll talk about some stuff that I've done and what I've been through, but I think the important bit is not for you to hear the things that I've done, but how it relates to your life, to your workplaces, to what you can take away from it. So this is, this is what I hope you take away. Product people and leaders is my favorite one out of those. I think it's the most important one, regardless of your job title, and if you're a line manager or program manager or whatever might go with it. All product people are leaders. So I stand by that. I'm going to do that at least twice a month. So, whirlwind through my past few years. Can you keep an eye on the time for me too?
Yeah.
Even though I've got notes, timeline, ADHD, once I start talking, I could be here for...
What, do you want us a warning?
Just, cut me off if I'm talking too long, if I go too fast, or I don't know.
I'll give you a half-time.
Okay.
Give you a half-time bell.
Awesome, thank you. Or if it gets boring. So in 2021, I was diagnosed with autism, and around the same time, I stepped up into a product manager role for the first time. Something like dredging up old traumas and weirdo traits and coping mechanisms with a panel of strangers to prepare you for leadership, right? As I got my feet under the desk, not only was I suddenly the last man standing on my product team, but I was starting to clock the scale of the technical debt that I had inherited. The situation had accumulated significant cultural debt also, born of a partially implemented solution, a lack of strategic collaboration, and a bunch of other stuff we probably don't really need to get into. Everyone had done their best, including the previous product team, but it was going to take a lot to rebuild and build relationships, trust, and a way of working. So reeling from all of this as my new reality, I did the only thing that I know how to do, put my head down and got to work. I knew how I felt the organisation should be working, at least with my team, but I still had to prove myself and show, not tell them, the way. I was sure of my vision, but communicating this was a steep learning curve, and I was weighed down by crippling imposter syndrome, as well as the competing demands from teams, and the competing demands that we all know of those short-term fixes versus the longer-term improvements. I was able to get approved design and development principles and change prioritization process, making the roles and the process clear, if not universally adopted. The organisation's values were up for discussion at that time as well, and I think everyone got sick of me saying that by embedding them in process, we made them a matter of design, not decision. So that gives you some insight to how I think about those things as well. around the same time as well, I pitched a neuro-inclusion program of work. I began to talk to my organisation about what is autism and other neurodiversity. In partnership with what was then Brain Badge, we began to adapt our processes and practices to recognise different needs and cognition. The Brain Badge methodology was structured around a mix of lean and agile practice, needs analysis, and iterative cycles of action and measurement against vision and goals. I liked this a lot, as it aligned with my experience of making change and what I was trying to achieve with my day job, the product management as well. So I formed a steering group and we got to work making changes to our recruitment and onboarding and meetings processes. Rich and I shaped and reshaped this early iteration of Brain Badge, and each of us reinforcing the ideas that worked for us. One concept that came out of this time for me was the diffusion of innovation theory. It helped cut through a lot of the imposter syndrome and everything I was feeling about being a small doses person and carrying the weight of it all on my shoulders. Side note, you're familiar with? So diffusion of innovation normally applies to technology adoption, and so we're going to go off script. I do have a picture. I should have included it. So it's basically like a bell curve, and so you've got your early adopters, 3 sets of most people, and your laggards, late adopters. And so the idea is in product, so you're trying to find those early adopters so that they can then tell your story for you, sell your product for you, and sort of be out there, thought leading their way through through LinkedIn or whatever it is that they do. And so they're kind of evangelizing about your product for you. And what I saw in that was, and I think this is a trap that a lot of us get sucked into as product managers, we try to be everything to everyone and do everything for everyone, and it's just, we can't. And so what I saw in that applied to my own leadership and my own role, my own place in the world was I don't need to try and be everything to everyone. All I need to do is convince a few people about whatever it is that I'm trying to do, whether it's culture change or something else. I can just get those little group of allies around me to bounce things off or to be okay with. And that's enough. And they can worry about convincing everybody else. They can, I'll sit with my steering group and then somebody else can go speak to the staff meeting. Not everything had to be me.
Can you talk to some, unless you're going to like some of the things that came out of this work stream? Or are you going to talk about? Keen to hear some of the ideas you came up with.
So I mentioned recruitment. One of the things that we did there, so we rewrote all our ads. We looked at hundreds of other recruitment ads. We had a lot of opinions, good and bad. We went through a lot of cycles. We improved our wording and relaxed that basically. And there's a lot of wording out there now. People say like, you don't have to tick every box, all of these kinds of things. So we brought a lot of that in. I was a massive advocate for taking the word fun out of the ad, for better or worse. I'm not going to apply for a job if it says fun. And when we're talking about culture and product culture and startup culture and all of that kind of stuff, that probably is a real selling point for a lot of people. And I don't mean to be disparaging about that. Like if that genuinely is compelling for you and how your organization works, like awesome. But it's not what where I'm going with that is that workplace wouldn't be a good fit for me. And also it's not the only way to be. And I would argue it's not the correct way to be a startup or any other kind of organization.
What does that conjure for you? Does that make you feel like you're going to come into a rave party or something and they're all having fun?
Like surprise participation.
Is that under the fun fear? Yeah.
If someone says something's going to be fun, maybe for you it is. For me, no. That's going to be my worst nightmare. I have more memes coming, so I have a couple that speak to that specifically. And a lot of it is the expectation, the obligation, the unknown. What it brings up for me is the same kind of thing as if you were to all start singing happy birthday, it's not my birthday, but it's and
I think
maybe
most people would freak out. I would freak out about that.
times 100, that's the kind of just horror that evokes in me, because what is happening? Why are we doing that? I don't understand. And it's not to say that I can't be fun. I mean, I'm not most of the time, to be fair. But that in a workplace, I think there are assumptions that go with that about surprise participation and it being loud and unexpected and things happening all the time. And
so I just come from the Wood Christmas party.
yes,
They had a little nice fun there about that listeners. So that a lot of the dynamics in our workplaces were very, very extrovert director leading a unit of introverts, introverted nerds who don't like, both for the most part, not down to the last person, but I'd say probably at least 60% are not organised fun kind of people. And others are, are reasonably substantial people, proportion of people just didn't come, right? So, like 10% of people just didn't come, and some of them are very much still not coming because of that, not associated. So, parties aren't my thing. But to give her due, she listened to feedback and made this not mandatory like it was last time. So a small group of people did the non-mandatory fun items, and we realised I think it's a little bit of a...
Also,
anecdote.
wasn't attending the Christmas party suddenly become optional the events?
Well, I think she may have got, actually, to be honest, I think she may have been, I don't know for sure, but it's the sort of thing where people have realised before they got there that the fun wasn't mandatory.
Yeah.
There might have been a few other people attended. It's entirely possible.
It's funny because I'm not going to Sasmus because I'm worried that they're all going to start dancing, and dancing is my biggest fear in public. So like, I'd go if it was going to be a different format, but I know it's going to be something different.
So 2 things that I want to say out of that is, first, can I introduce you? Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
This is my friend Andrew, who took many late night tearful phone calls as I tried to complete my master's degree. So feel free to, well, yeah, one of the only people that phone calls. That's another thing. There aren't many people that I would take a phone call from. To some point, it's an introvert extrovert thing, but it's the same kind of, oh no, surprise, what do they want? Kind of situation. Yeah, tangent. My point for bringing that up was insights and discussion points. Feel free to drag out of me whatever needs to come up out of this. And we discussed a lot of the workplace stuff along the way as well. The other thing I was going to say about that, the other thing that you said about an extrovert leading a team of nerdy introverts is kind of the heart of a lot of what I want to get to about this creating culture stuff. Skipping ahead to a later slide, engineering and tech is, as industries, that's where the neurodivergent people are, especially engineering, closely followed by tech. And if we're going to stereotype wildly about devs, who we probably all work with directly or indirectly, that totally describes a lot of what I want to talk about. But product people can be neurodivergent too, autistic in my case, and ADHD. And there are lots of different types of neurodiversity as well. Some types of engineering are full of dyslexic people because they're really amazing with spatial reasoning and communication and that kind of visual picturing stuff in space and figuring out how it goes together and all of that kind of thing. It's not just about reading and writing, but yeah. I have a slide later about that. Your original question was, what else did we do? So I have, yeah, I'll get to that. Meetings and events. So we very much did focus on that as well. One of the things, it's a small thing, but one of the things that our leadership was the happiest with was about our staff meetings. So almost all of the workforce at this employer I was at was on site in one office. Beautiful building, but shiny concrete and sort of that industrial kind of look. So I loved the look of it, but holy hell was it loud. Everything would echo. As soon as conversation would start, and it's like in a bar, everyone starts talking louder, the place just echoed, and it was enough, that staff room, especially if there were drinks involved, it was enough to bring me to tears. It just, even with earplugs, and I would wander around the office with my noise cancelling headphones, awful. And for staff meeting, we're all sitting there in these little chairs, and I'd sit in the back, and I'd get there early to settle in, and even then, it was loud, and I didn't like it, and I didn't want to be there, and it was uncomfortable, and so half the time I just wouldn't go to staff meeting. So we had the conversation with leadership, and there was never a rule at any point that everybody had to go there in person. Obviously, we had a bunch of remote workers as well, and they would attend from their laptops. But it just wasn't the done thing for whatever reason that people wouldn't attend online from their desks. No one ever said you can't, it's just no one did. But we explicitly said, you don't have to come to the meeting. If you want to attend online, just attend from your desk. And the rate went from 60-something to like 85% of attendance. Because people would attend at their desk. And there were lots of different reasons. Our IT help desk guy, as well as not wanting to be there in person, had stuff to do. By removing that barrier, and not asking about the impact of the barrier, so not getting into why don't you want to attend, and trying to fix something on an individual level, we just changed it, normalised the fact that you don't have to be there in person. More people attended. Back to recruitment. One of the best things that we did in that space was give people the questions beforehand. We really had to fight for this one. Giving people the questions beforehand can be controversial. Some people think, in the age of ChatGPT and whatever else, that you can prepare and cheat. It doesn't take much to just ask a follow-up question, and you can tell just with a conversation whether somebody actually is understanding what they're telling you and whether they can back it up. Make it so much more genuine and unsable answers from a person if they have a minute to think about what it is that you're actually asking, and what would be the best example to bring to talk about that. I hope she wouldn't mind me saying, but one of the people that we recruited, actually the first person that we recruited after we started doing that, was our new people and culture leader. And that was one of the reasons she'd seen our new ad, applied for this, and then was a total evangelist for that. And the neurodiversity program thereafter, partly because of that change. So it kind of seems like a little thing in some ways. But there aren't actually that many roles where we expect somebody to turn up and perform. When I was first applying for jobs 15 years ago, whatever it was, I didn't know that you were allowed to bring notes. And so I sort of sat there, trying to remember all the things and fumbling over all my words, and it was going awfully because how would I have known any different? And there were so many unexamined beliefs that I had at that time that really prevented me from finding a job, from settling in properly, and all of that still persists. There are a lot of what I'm going to get to, or what I want you to take away from this, is to pick apart all of those unexamined assumptions about the way you communicate, collaborate. What expectations do you have on your team, on your staff? What is it that you're expecting of them? And is that relevant to what you actually need from them? If you're hiring for, again, stereotyping wildly with the devs, or other engineers, are you expecting them to show up and perform and sort of be this shiny, gregarious person and respond on the spot to all of this stuff, if that's not actually what they're going to be doing in their job, or whatever else, however else you might want to apply that, depending on what job you're talking about. Sometimes
halfway through.
Thank you. Okay. Is that an interesting thing to continue with, or
Maybe we can bring those discussions into the table. Maybe.
Yes.
If you've got more content you want to get to.
I do. I'm going to go really fast through the next one. So the neuro-inclusion work led to a master's degree focusing on, that's good. This was my processing. So the work, what is the work, what's the research, and then liberation, which is kind of thing that I'd brought through the masters. And so this was me trying to figure out what am I doing with this work. I'm going to totally skip past that. Basically, so we were 2 years into the neuro-inclusion work by this time. I was feeling that the work was falling more and more on my shoulders. Anybody will know, you'll probably be familiar with concepts like emotional labour and cultural labour and all of this kind of stuff, where we have all these expectations on people. You're a woman, of course you'll organise the birthday cake, of course you'll figure out if we have groceries and plan the meals. You're the Māori person, of course you'll do a karakia for us, all of this, it's not your job, there's just an expectation that you'll get that done. I had very much pitched this program and was leading it and was pushing, but I was feeling more and more that it was falling all on my shoulders, and that other people weren't necessarily helping in the way that ideally they might have. So what I was trying to do, I'd seen the parallels between product practice and then all of this inclusion stuff and things that I'd seen in activist spaces, and I wanted to bring those together and really shape that up in a way that would be more accessible. And I wanted to figure out why things weren't going the way that I thought they were. I figured that I would need a break and a breath, so there's a picture of my dog. Just have a drink. His name's Falcon. So, product practice. I think that we can skip a lot of what I was going to talk about. My notes for this are, what do I mean when I say product practice? Really briefly, it's the tools and the mindsets and the methodologies and the ways of working and all of that stuff that we do when we're doing product. So the Agile and the Scrum and that kind of stuff, but it's, the mindsets and the ideas that we have and kind of the culture that builds up around that. And I think that all of that, the way that we approach doing all of the things that we do to build and deliver product, if we apply all of that to culture, we already have the tools to create an inclusive culture. We know how to do that. We just might not have thought of that as an idea. We might not know the questions to ask. It has never occurred to us, but we totally have all of the tools. That cycle, this is a screenshot from my master's. I didn't write a paper, I made a mirror. And the dialogue, action, reflection cycle mirrors both liberation theory, radical theory, but also you'll recognize it as the iterative cycles. And so that was kind of the core of how I brought those together. So if we think about what is our culture and our inclusion practice, running it through these cycles and make a roadmap and what are we doing, and let's expose these assumptions and let's test stuff and let's talk about it and collaborate and all of that stuff. That's essentially what that is. And that was the core of the masters.
And are you saying that flow happens in product? We talk about stuff, we do some things, we reflect, then we talk. Are you saying that that's also a good way to think about how we work as a team and the culture as a team? Use the same flow?
I think so, yeah. Testing assumptions, I think, is really. What slide have I got next? No. Testing assumptions about how we work, how we communicate, how we collaborate. What are the practices and processes that we've got that kind of underpin and promote that? I think all of that is happening with product. We know about stuff like cross-functional working. So we collect people from different disciplines for a reason, right? We know that the outcomes are better when we get advice from different places. And it's the same with inclusion practice. If we're just talking about neurodiversity, try and get people with different experience. If it's other, cultural practice, whatever else, different perspectives. Let's break down what the work is. Think of it as a roadmap approach. Another thing about inclusion and culture and all of that is, like productivity is typically, it's never going to be done. We're never going to be finished with inclusion work. So that's that continuous improvement mindset that we can bring across. Um,
I would say, so I think there's a problem across, like if everybody, understands the products and product, and IT product in particular, it's going to keep developing, it's going to be delicious, it's going to be using new technology, it's all going to be new and wonderful. In 10 years' time, it'll have oodles of new features and be on a different platform, blah, 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 blah. But I think that everything else about, say, an IT team, we get to Agile, tick off the Agile box, and we've done that as Agile. We've got 2 week sprints, we've got retros and everything, and so we work through things, everything's fine. We take the neurodiversity box, everything's now fine. When you do neurodiversity, everything's done. Stop thinking about it. Would that be a fair, like there's a disconnect between those two mindsets, a constantly evolving mindset for the product, but a box checking where they're now going to think about it. Mindset for the team. Is that?
I was thinking about that too, and because I also was thinking about tick the box Agile, because one of the best
100%.
projects I've worked on was one where I really just held the engineers only to account for like the daily 5 minutes and proper stand up. And I really only kept it to like the necessary Agile rather than all of the things that you can do, and it worked so well, and they loved it. And I also feel, I was wondering as well, like some of the cycle, there might be some differences between, like, I'm more of a strategic thinker, organizer versus like the doers. And I was half thinking about, like where is that difference in the cycle as well, because the doers usually want to keep doing, and they don't want to be doing a lot of stuff, but they're still happy to receive things as well.
Yep,
so.
100%. Yeah. What would I say about that? So an interesting conversation that we had over coffee, I think, was about whether everything has to be agile and whether everyone has to come to. Do you remember more about what we were discussing? Relates to what you've just said, I think. And you'll probably recognize who I'm thinking of, if I can explain myself properly. I shouldn't have said that.
Okay, I'll catch up. I can't remember the conversation yet.
That's okay. I'm doing a horrible job of this, but we'll sort this out. How you described doing agile in that case to me is the intent, I guess, of agile rather than the box ticking and the sort of, but we've done all the meetings, so therefore it must be correct. No, you've missed the point. Like if you've done all the meetings, but you've not thought about what needs to happen and what's actually needed in the situation to deliver what you're trying to deliver, your way sounds so much better. And I would say that is an inclusive approach, because they probably didn't need to want you micromanaging them. All that had to be done in that case was that light touch approach. They were given free rein to do what they needed to do with the timeframes and whatever else the specifics were in that case. So I would say that is an inclusive approach in that case, and that's the kind of culture change that I'm talking about, I guess.
I had a thought. Like I've been working on my own, like in my own business for 8 years, and so
sorry to have to leave you. I noticed some pizzas came in. There are microwaves just down, if you go straight ahead, on the right-hand side.
just put on.
Or you're going to eat and talk at the same time. Just to add, I raised 2 adopted kids overseas, and one of them has really advanced levels of ADHD. And so the coping strategies that we had to put around that, so I was fascinated by your talk, and so sorry that I had to go. And my daughter has also ADHD, but also dyslexia and dyscalculia. So raising them as a single dad in a foreign country was really exciting. So I just want to acknowledge what you're doing is just fantastic, and all credit and kudos.
Thank you.
And that's what I've got to say. You guys enjoy the rest of your evening.
I was going to say that my first thought when you talked about the analogies between how you might treat the culture of the team and product process was that 8 years ago, which is the last time I worked for a company and had a team that I worked with regularly, we weren't talking about neurodiversity.
No,
And in fact, before that, we weren't as well. And so I'm wondering whether this cycle is a regular thing that starts, that most companies you talk about or hear about are thinking about it. And so they're already starting to talk about it and they're on this journey, or is there some work to do to get people to even think about what to ask?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think the conversation about neurodiversity is happening. A lot of organisations probably aren't trying to figure out what to do about it. I think a lot of the time organisations don't know how to start.
Yeah.
Or they hit that point that we hit where they've done the quick wins and then they don't know what to do next, or it gets hard and the novelty's worn off and they kind of go, oh, well, we've got day jobs, we've ticked the box, so to speak, or we've done this easy stuff, not sure what's next. We have good intent, but we don't know how to continue. And so having iterative cycles, whether you use these labels or not, I think it's an accessible way to put this kind of work, or it's a way to put this kind of work into accessible language for organisations. I think we if you're in the product kind of world, we'll recognise roadmaps and all of this kind of stuff, and taking that approach of breaking things down, and we'll achieve a thing, whatever it is. We've got our vision and our goal, and however it is that we've collected data to figure out what we're going to do. And so we'll try something and we'll discuss it and measure it and figure out if it was the right thing or not. And then maybe we'll go again, or like, yes, that was good, or no, it wasn't. We'll try something else. So that's really what this represents. I think this kind of conversation relates to inclusion, regardless of whether it's about neurodiversity or not. I think that if we have unexamined assumptions about what culture should be, coming back to the fun thing, and I'm kind of over-egging that one, I am a grumpy old man, but unexamined assumptions, I think, are really the biggest thing that I would have people confront. We do things this way because it's the way that it's done. This is the correct way to be a human. Of course, we're going to make eye contact and shake hands, and I'm going to judge you horribly if you don't. Yes, I expect you to speak without notes and attend all meetings in person, and spend your time going back to back in meetings, and wear a scratchy suit and sit here under the fluorescent lights and do all of these things. Return to work as a conversation, I think, is not about neurodiversity specifically, but it is something that really does affect neurodivergent people.
Are there good ways, when you're doing the reflection, like product, it's sometimes really hard to know what to measure?
Yes.
So how do you think
100%.
about measuring the effectiveness of whatever you're putting into practice?
I think that depends on the situation that you're in, and whether you have like an employee network or a person that's standing here saying, let's do this, let's do that. It depends whether your people and culture team are on board, or it depends whether you're kind of just doing this in your team. Retros can be kind of hit and miss as a format, but if you're doing something like that, some kind of regular, pulse checks, one-on-ones with your team if you're in that position, whatever it is, just anything to kind of gauge what's happening. Safe space came up before, and I've got, come to that slide later if we still have time. I've got a similar slide later on. It's the same, essentially the same cycle, but it's about creating space. And so what I did, how I started all of this conversation about neurodiversity at work, is I just started talking about it. And I was open about things. I talked about the autism and the ADHD. Well, the ADHD came a little later. I didn't know that at first. That's really obvious now, now that I know. I started sharing stories about what was going on and what I struggled with and what I'd done to try and make things easier and what I was learning. and other people felt able to share things with me or with the whole group based on that. And so that's the kind of thing that builds culture. As leaders, as managers, if you're open and vulnerable about yourself as much as you feel comfortable doing, if you share when you don't know what to do about something, if you're not feeling well, if you're upset about something that's going on, whatever it is, there's a reciprocity to that, and building trust. You're sharing all of that and making it safe for people to share. So somebody does share that they're struggling with something, whatever it is, and people show up for them and they complement that, or they mitigate that, or depending on the problem, whatever it is. If you're going to brace around each other, you don't blame them, you fix it, you get on with it. That builds trust, it builds safety. One of the memes that I've got, do you know from The Office where Michael's like, I declare agile. You can't just declare agile, but you can't declare a safe space either. Certainly part of it. You can't just say, as a person in the majority, it's not. So as a Pākehā, as a white person, I can't say this place is culturally safe because it's not up to me. I don't know. As a queer person, I'm the one that can say, yeah, this is a safe space for me as a queer person. Not for all queer people necessarily, but for neurodivergent people. So whatever it is. A friend of mine who did a master's at the same time talked a lot about safer spaces, not safe. Because again, definition of done. It's never going to be done. It's not perfect. We'll do our best. We'll commit to continue and to contribute to that. So safer, we'll do what we can. So yeah, calling out these unexamined assumptions, I think, is a really big part of all of that. I'm just thinking about my flowchart. I'm so far off track. This is great. I love the discussion, but I'm so sorry. This is just.
I reckon maybe another 10 minutes.
Okay, let me look at my notes.
Maybe do the group huddle.
Let's do the memes. I've got. What is neurodiversity? Please have some memes. You probably can't read those.
I feel like that is symbolic of what.
Yes, it is.
From a distance, a lot.
Oh, yeah.
But I think I asked this. You asked me for some questions on an email. One of my questions for me was the distinction between neurodiversity, the concept that brains are different, maybe. I don't want to make a definition because I'm not even sure I know it. And then being neurodivergent, which is something different. It's like on the spectrum of diversity that at some point you've achieved being divergent. Like what is that? How do you think about that definition?
So, if you want a book or an essay, Nick Walker, Neuroqueer Heresies, is for anyone who wants further reading. That is the one that I recommend, and I saved a paper on I'll put it in the chat if anybody does want further reading. So there's a lot of founding definitions there. Nick Walker's one of the OG scholars in the space has been writing about it for many years. In short, though, each individual is neurodivergent, group is neurodiverse. Divergent being like not the norm, inverted commas, diverse being all of us. So a person isn't neurodiverse. You will hear that a lot. It's not correct, but it's not offensive. It's just not, it's like bad grammar. Yeah. So it's not, someone might raise an eyebrow at you or something, but it's not wrong. So neurodivergent, some people will use that as an identity, otherwise it's just a descriptor. So basically it's diverging from the norm. Is what
and the norm being some loosely defined thing that we can maybe agree on.
So this one here is a graphic that I filched off the internet. Autism spectrum. I think ADHD is a spectrum also. They don't make these for ADHD, don't know why. A list of things around the edge, so eye contact and posture and anxiety and noise sensitivity and whatever. So the spectrum isn't high to low or normal to severe or whatever other words. It's a spectrum of behaviors, so to speak, and so all autistic people have a different presentation, a different combination of all of that stuff. we might look more or less normal to the world, I suppose. We may need more or less support. We might struggle with things that the world doesn't really see as a huge problem, or not. So
And there's also a norm, it's not just statistical.
clusters is the other thing I was going to say.
So the norm, the neurotypical, the norm isn't merely a statistical average, right? It's that it's society is set up and groups and organisations are set up for a certain kind of person and aren't set up for others. And so it doesn't really matter whether that's 10% of people or 90% of people. That does matter, but part of it is that the system, the society, the organisation, and the affordances and the things that are available, the things you're allowed to do and things you're not allowed to do, and things that you look scant on you, is there to sort out a certain group of people with a certain cluster of attributes, and if you're kind of outside that cluster of attributes, it doesn't work so well. So that's part of it. It's not just statistical. It's not just a matter of statistics that large group of people have these things in common, and they're slightly somewhat different from some other group of people. It's that society works for those people more, even maybe a small group of those people really well, but not so much for other people. So it becomes sort of normative in society. It's the effect of that. So.
And the difference between autism and ADHD, for example, or any of the others, they're sort of clusters of behaviours, and so genetically or whatever else, it probably isn't. Well, they're still figuring it out. If there is the lines between them, or the descriptors often are kind of arbitrary. It's just if you have enough of the things that look like this, then they'll diagnose you. Whatever I want to tell you about memes. It can be really inconsistent. That's me at an Iron Maiden concert with my noise cancelling headphones. I included that one because one of the most difficult things I think about neurodiversity for me, and having autism and ADHD, which gang up on each other something awful sometimes. Sometimes it's amazing, and honestly, I think that's why I'm a good product manager. I can deal with levels of detail and complexity and all of these kinds of things, as long as I don't need to speak to a room full of people. Inconsistent. As long as I can manage my energy. But I never quite know on any given day how much energy I'm going to have. One of the difficult things that you kind of have to get your head around when you learn, when you start to recognize that for yourself is budget for your high energy days and your low energy days. It's sort of more like a sprinter than a marathoner, so to speak, or managing both of those. If we're thinking about things that you can do for your team or for yourselves, one of the best gifts that I got from my manager was telling me to block out my calendar. Again, I never knew I could do that. I didn't know I was allowed. I was trying so hard to, be this perfect person that clearly I was never going to be able to achieve or sustain. Back-to-back meetings, all of these things. So once we had that conversation about the third time, and it sort of sunk in that, okay, I was actually allowed to do that, and it was going to be okay. If I had a heavy meeting, lots of conversations, lots of people, whatever, I would block out the next however long. No more contact for the rest of that day, or at least for a little while, or I'd go for a walk. If I'm doing something like this, I'm probably going to sit in bed for the next 3 days because I need to recover, and I need to not blame myself for that. And I'm still working on that, to be honest, but that's just how my brain is. The more that you demand of you people, society, the more that we demand of neurodivergent people to act outside of the comfort zone, without recognizing how difficult that is, the harder it is each time to bounce back. letting neurodivergent people work from home most of the time, all the time, is honestly probably one of the best things that you can do. Not for everybody. I go spare when I'm at home all the time. Once or twice a week in the office is perfect for me. And I do love speaking to people, and often it is the best way to get things done. It's just I need to, balance that energy. How are we going for time? I feel like I've talked over.
2 or 3
Okay.
minutes. Yeah.
When you go into the office, what does your day look like? You're talking about time blocking and things.
Yeah.
You kind of go in because that's the time where it's going to be high people. Do you have certain parts of the day, like in the mornings, that it's easier? They will be different between each person, but what does your day look like if you're in the office?
Yeah. So I typically would do quite long days when I went to the office, which might have been counterproductive, don't know, but that's, and so I could do shorter days when I was at home. I typically would have a lot of contact time, a lot of meetings, because, and I'd go in on days when there were meetings and then build it around that. I would tend to organise one-to-one catch-ups with any of those that I had most people on days when I was at home, because for me, you can have better conversations, not in the same space. Depends on individuals. Usually, for me, half my team was remote, half in person, so I didn't necessarily need to worry about trying to get to, say, sprint planning or whatever else. It was the engaging with other team stuff that I would tend to do on office days. Partly because I live in the Wairarapa and I don't like sitting in traffic. That's part of the reason I would do the long days, so I'd have the early and the late as quiet time, which is cool. Plan my day. Often a long walk at lunchtime, but not always. Depends on my energy, depends on the day, all of that. I'm someone who likes to sit in a space and just chill for a second before a meeting. It makes me walking into a room late, especially if I don't know where to sit, is the worst, and I'm not going to be able to recover from that in that meeting probably. And that was something wonderful that leadership would do for me when I had to go to speak to the leadership meetings. They knew my seat and they would vacate it for me when I had to go speak to them. And it just meant that I was able to show up and feel valued by them, not be on the wrong foot. And so I was able to perform, walk into the middle of their meeting, into their space, room full of leadership, be able to say what I need to say. They knew that I was going to read off my notes, that ask me whatever they needed to ask, and then I'd go away again. And that was I think of all the things they did for me, that's my favourite, was that they would give me my chair. Funny, it was the CE's favourite chair. But yeah, his comment was I just think it's funny we're like the same chair. And it was such a kind thing for them to do once they realised, because of course I didn't mention it for ages. I felt so foolish about it. But that's kind of the culture change and digging out these assumptions, Once we talk about these things, well, it didn't matter to them, but it did matter to me. One of the examples that I wanted to mention was about, so if you work with a lot of devs, one of my favourite hacks, I hate that word, let your devs set the time for stand-up. Your mileage will vary depending on how big your teams are and all of that kind of thing, but that's something I've had a lot of good success with. Again, tiny thing, doesn't really matter to me. My day is full of interruptions a lot of the time, especially the organisation I was in, being the only product manager. Everybody wanted to know something, and I sort of was in a gatekeeper position, sitting around my team, like, don't interrupt them, talk to me. So I was being interrupted all the time and going off to meetings and things. I needed them to not interrupt my dev. And so I do not have the word that I want, passed it along. And yeah, let my devs, if you have more, set stand-up time. And often it was first thing in the morning, but not always. For quite a while we had it sitting at 1 o'clock, and it was so that he could smash out whatever it was that he needed to get done, start whatever time he wanted, get that done before he had to speak to us. And I think what that does, and the details of that specific, anecdote don't really matter. Apply it to whatever your work is. But again, it was something that my days interrupted. It mattered to him. What I was trying to do was, set him up for success. He needed the thinking time and the space. Yeah.
Thank you.
Um,
Do you want to bring it back to the table? Should we? Is it time to wind down
Yeah.
the formal
I mean,
presentation bit?
look at my slide. So I mentioned this before, creating culture is shaping space. So have the conversations and do your dialogue and all that stuff. Authentic commitment. There's nothing worse than fake safe spaces. And that's a real flippant way to put it. But and this is a difficult one because I don't want to say this and have everybody be too scared to try anything, because it's the opposite of what I mean and what I want. But what I mean is don't do the tick boxing. Really have those conversations with people. And I'm sure you can imagine what this looks like with, say, user research or whatever else as well with product, actually engage, actually find out what they want, and don't just window dress. Thinking that somewhere is a safe space, thinking that someone's got your back, whatever it is, and they don't, is worse than someone not even pretending in the first place. And they might have meant well, and that's a conversation, but that's where the reflection and the iteration comes in. I would rather someone try and get it wrong but be open about that, have the conversation continue, than either of the extremes. I can go back to that. Yeah, we don't have time for this. Systems approach. So, well, this is my master's. So, having a systemic approach protects the practice, protects the people, protects the work, and it mitigates against something falling apart. So when you're building something like culture, it's really precarious, right? In a way, like if you're trying to make change in a certain area, it's just going to ping back to the way it was when the slightest thing happens. But the more stuff you can build around it, and the metaphor that I usually use to explain all of this is about going running and all of the things that you can do to maximize the chance that you're actually going to go running. And get ready for this race that you've also booked. That's the metaphor that I usually go for with that. But the more stuff that you can build in, put your cross-functionality and continuous improvement and all of these things, all your values and whatever it is, build it all into process and have processes and practices, all of that, scaffold all of this stuff around so that no matter what happens, you always come back to that. And there's always another person or another part of the process or whatever it is. You can just come back to any part of that and it will pick up and it'll reinforce this embraces. Yeah. All product people are leaders. Yeah, so this was my main point. Like, I think a lot of product talks and all of this kind of stuff that I've heard through this community, this is one of the main ideas that I've heard and that I want to come back to. We talk about leading through influence and what is it? All responsibility, no power. All power, no authority. All responsibility, no authority. Same kind of idea, I think. We can all shape culture, whether we're in a line management position or not, whether we're in charge of stuff or not. I do think that all product people and business analysts, I think, are in a position to influence process and culture, which may or may not attract weirdos, etc. Yeah, last slide.
Nice, thank you.
Very kind.
I think I might turn the stream off in a minute and then we'll just sort of have
Good idea.
sort of chats. But I want to say thank you and apologise for having such lax instructions about which room we were meeting in, because based on what you said, I imagine I freaked you out majorly by giving you bad instructions and you arrived and it was all happening. So I want to thank you for pushing through that and being brave enough to get up here and share some ideas. I think it was amazing. Thank you. And that's all we've got time for. Thanks everyone on the stream.